high draft picks. While one team used them in the more traditional sense of building a roster around young talent, the other side viewed draft picks more as currency to acquire veteran star players. But whether traded away or used in the draft, there's no denying those picks were essential in setting up Super Bowl 56. Good night, everyone, and welcome to the Super Bowl pregame show to top all Super Bowl pregame shows. Although my two guests probably will tell me, no, that's not true. We've got something better coming up this week, and they probably do, having the conversations that we've had. So sorry for the late start. We had some technical difficulties, but we are here from Stuff About Sports, and you know our regular every single week, Dwayne Marcus from G.O.A.T Talk with Marcus. Guys, I'm not going to ask you how you're doing because we've talked all behind the scenes already, so we're going to jump immediately into this. Jerm is ready. He's nodding his head. So quickly, we're going to get to the first segment of this show. Jerm, Matt Stafford, Joe Burrow in Super Bowl 56. Which quarterback would you want for the big game?
Listen, man, I want the guy that isn't supposed to be here. I want Joe Burrow. Understand? Not Joe Burrow. I want jump off Joe Burrow. He's wearing the rimless Cartier buffalo horn frames, chinchillas down to his feet in the Super Bowl. He brought the Bengals back to relevancy. He's the dude that everybody counted out. They had him, his offensive line wasn't good enough. He can't do it in year two. He's the quickest number one pick to start in the Super Bowl. It took Matt Stafford, the opposing quarterback, 13 years to do it. Joe Burrow did it in technically a year and a half because he was hurt half last season. So I want Joe Burrow, the guy who doesn't have the loaded team and is still representing his squad in the Super Bowl.
There's a reason they saved Marcus for last because I feel like I already know his answer. He's going to give me his entire name. So Dwayne, I'm here waiting for it. The veteran, the sophomore, who do you want with Super Bowl 56 on the line?
Joseph Lee Burrow. Joseph Lee Burrow. Now, here's the thing, and this is beautiful, and I've been rubbing this in Justin's face every chance I've gotten, right? Because, Baker Mayfield proved to be a hot pile of dog crap, which, we kind of already knew, but I, wanted to hold out hope. And Sam Darnold got hurt, and so he didn't really have the kind of turnaround career season I thought he was going to have in Carolina. But Justin kind of forgot that two of my other guys this season were Joe Burrow and Matt Stafford. And so for me, I'm sitting pretty because no matter who wins this game, I get to come on Justin's show from now until the next Super Bowl and brag about how two of my guys fought in the Super Bowl. And one of my guys this season, and it's been a wacky season, one of my guys this season won a Super Bowl. But yeah, Joseph Lee Burrow. And it's not because I don't trust Matt Stafford. It's not because I don't think that Matt Stafford's a good quarterback. It's not because, Joe Burrow has the better coach or the better talent around him, because all of those things are false. I do trust Matt Stafford. I do think that Matt Stafford's a good coach. He does have the more talented team, as Jerm alluded to. He does have the better coach with the experience. But here's the thing, and I said it last week on Justin's show. I think that was last week. My days kind of run together, but I think it was last Monday when I was here. There's not a moment too big for Joe Burrow. There has yet to be a moment in the NFL that has seemed to be too big for Joe Burrow. Right, and Matt Stafford's had his moments in his career. I mean, he's thrown touchdown passes with arms hanging out of sockets, and he's led a myriad of comebacks in his career, and he's had his moments. But this just feels like it's Joe Burrow's time. And I feel like Joe Burrow operates best as the underdog. He doesn't want us to call the Bengals underdog, but that's like they're the underdog. They're going into LA to play the LA Rams. They are the underdog, but not the better team. But like, he won a national championship as the underdog. He won the AFC North as the underdog. He's won every playoff game this season, I would presume, as the underdog, except for maybe the game against the Raiders. Like, no one expected this Bengals team to be in the Super Bowl. Forget this year, like, for a while, despite Joe Burrow being the quarterback. So yeah, give me Joseph Lee Burrow, Tiger King. Give me Joey B, man. Give me Joey B.
Mm-hmm.
I hate comparisons, right? Because if you it's after joy. Because when you compare on shows like this, it sounds like, oh, well, he took this guy so he doesn't like the other guy. Put this disclaimer out there very, very, very quickly. I like Joseph Burrow a lot. A lot. If I'm starting a franchise right now and you told me, Justin, you have Joe Burrow as your quarterback, I'm elated. Like, give me a Super Bowl in 5 years at least. And, well, the Bengals may get 1 and 2. But here's my thing. You asking me to choose between the two? Give me the guy. Yeah, I'm about to say this. Give me the guy with 6,000 more pass attempts and how much? 156 more games. I'm going to take Matt Stafford in this game, and I'm not telling you he's going to be better, but unlike a certain person in Kansas City, I don't think the Bengals will get away with fooling Matt Stafford for the entire half. I think Matt Stafford has seen enough that you're not going to fool him. And this postseason run, we've talked about everything but Matt Stafford's play. He has 6 touchdowns to just 1 interception. Granted, it should be 2. If some safety in San Francisco, he should be home.
Twice.
If a certain, cornerback / safety in San Francisco just knew how to catch dollies, like we wouldn't be having this discussion. But the interception wasn't held. So that being said, he has 6 touchdowns, just 1 interception, 3 straight wins in the playoffs, and the experience of having seen it all in 13, 14 seasons. I like Joe because Joe is not rattled by anything whatsoever. But I don't think that Cincinnati is going to get away with fooling Matt Stafford, like who's seen 160 something or 182 odd games, like what they did with Patrick Mahomes. I want people to know, right? And I don't want to bash Patrick Mahomes here. But as great as Patrick Mahomes' talent is, right, he still doesn't understand totally reading defenses and seeing things pre-snap up. And that's where I think the difference in having a Matt Stafford. I like Joe Burrow going forward in future. There's one game, though, in the line, and I think, of course, his biggest cheerleader talks about it, Dan Orlovsky. I think the best fourth quarter quarterback in the entire league has indeed been Matt Stafford. But you know me, if you're on this show a lot, quarterbacks get too much credit and too much blame. So, Dwayne, this time I'm going to start with you. We have seen 2 great front offices put together 2 Super Bowl runs in extremely contrasting fashion, as we talked about on the intro of the show. One team used their draft picks to draft players, which you typically use draft picks for. The other team used it as currency to get veteran players. Dwayne, which front office has been more responsible for the respective Super Bowl run?
I really think it depends on what you yourself prefer, because you're right. I think we live in an era now where we're so used to teams drafting their players with their draft picks, primarily because usually the teams that have the picks all suck. The Rams, however, have the philosophy. Well, instead of using these picks to go out and get a player from college and try to cultivate and develop talent, which there's nothing wrong with that. They figure, well, let's get veterans who understand the game and who are good at the craft, putting them all together and craft a game plan and a scheme on a week to week, game to game basis to make it work. Both instances have worked. I don't think that one front office deserves any more credit than the other, because the roads have been really similar. Like I don't see. If you look at it, I think the Rams won more games than the Bengals did this season, if I'm not mistaken. But if you look at just the general trajectory of the Rams and the Bengals as far as how they got here, at least from the last month of the regular season till now, it's very similar. The only difference is in the beginning of the offseason, after this trade was made for Matt Stafford, we all kind of thought that the Rams would be here at that time. Nobody had the Bengals winning more than 4 football games this season. So that's really the big difference. Because it's Joe Burrow, I'm going to say the Bengals deserve more credit because it's Joe Burrow. But then again, when you have the career that he had in college, the Bengals made the obvious choice by drafting Joe Burrow a couple years ago. And then foregoing drafting an offensive lineman to bring in Jamar Chase and obviously drafting Evan McPherson, who's been the best kicker in football this postseason. That's a big part of it too. I don't think this is a question that can be answered until after the Super Bowl, at least for me, because like we won't know which philosophy is better. If the drafting your players is better and developing them, or if the bringing in the veteran guys is better. Both have been successful this season. But you know, because it's Joey B, I'm gonna say the Bengals. It's Joey B.
Jerm, I hope you give me an answer, because me personally, I'm gonna sit on the fence just like Dwayne, because I have no idea. So Jerm, who deserves more credit?
I will give you a straight answer, and I am like our friend Marcus here. I am a big jump off Joe Burrow fan, but I will give credit to the team that actually made the moves. This question caters to the team that actually did the most. Anybody could have drafted Joe Burrow. Other than that, the Bengals didn't really do anything to help their team other than draft his receiver the next year. So I have to give credit to General Manager Les Snead for the Rams, because he didn't pull off just one rising blockbuster trade. He pulled off two. Got Matt Stafford and he got Von Miller, and it completely changed. And he somehow managed to get all of these star players within the cap space. Think about the roster they have. That takes a lot of wizardry in the front office. So any team can draft the right quarterback and make a run if you have that guy. We've seen it done in the past. But it takes real work to manipulate the cap space and pull off some of these trades. Now, granted, their window is right now, and if it doesn't work, the Rams are going to be irrelevant. But you make these moves to win the Super Bowl this year. And so to answer this particular question, I will give credit to the Rams front office more.
Varying ways, they both were exceptional. So to your point, Jerm, when you sit down and see the Rams, there was a lot of talk about Jared Goff already got you to the Super Bowl. Is Matt Stafford worth the number ones that you had to give up for him? Same situation with Von Miller. Like, Von left Denver. Denver's defense actually got better. And, you gave up a lot already for Jalen Ramsey. Then you have a situation where your window, as you correctly mentioned, Jerm, is like 2 years. It's either this year, next year, or it's all going to go to crap. And then you still get Odell Beckham Jr. You don't know what money space he is. You don't know how he fits in situation. And all of this you've managed to fit the cap. So I want to see, right, hats off to Les Snead, because without Matt Stafford, you're not getting this far with Jared Goff. You've heard me say it over and over again. You may have gone that far before. In this new quarterback era, you're not getting out of a divisional round with the worst quarterback in your conference in the playoff field. That's not going to happen. At the same time, Joe Burrow may be a slam dunk pick, but look at the picks before and since. We don't talk a lot about T. Higgins, and I think T. Higgins had 1,100 yards. He was the other draft pick, or the other high draft pick in the Joe Burrow draft that the Cincinnati Bengals went out and got. Joe Mixon from a couple of years before, that's a slam dunk pick as well. Then we all cried down Cincinnati for not taking Penei Sewell in favor of a receiver when there were a million receivers in this draft. And it just turns out Jamar Chase may turn out to be one of the best wide receivers to ever play football. They went and got him.
Yeah.
They also got flack for taking a rookie kicker in the 5th round in Evan McPherson. And all Evan McPherson has done in these playoffs is score 40 of their 72 points so far. That is well more than half of the points that they have in these playoffs. Let us not forget in the draft, they went out, they had one of the worst defenses last season. I think we all forget that. So what did they do? They target 2 New Orleans Saints in Von Bell and Trey Hendrickson. And those 2 guys were the reason that they won that game against Kansas City, along with their defensive coordinator. Trey Hendrickson, I think, had a pair of sacks, and Von Bell had a crucial interception in overtime. All of these picks, like from Jamar Chase to obviously Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, Evan McPherson, then the two pickups in free agency, Bell and Hendrickson, have played a crucial role in what we're seeing here in Cincinnati. I don't know if anyone is better than the next, and I think the Super Bowl 56 shows us there is more than one way to skin a cat. You can either sit down and say you're going to draft for success, or you're going to use that draft capital and find what you want. I'm with Dwayne, I don't know, but hats off to Les Snead, hats off to Duke Tobin. I think they have done tremendous jobs in varying ways, and they are crucial to what we're seeing because, again, we all talk about the quarterbacks, but as a certain person, God rest his soul, Neil is behind the scenes cursing me, but a certain Chicago Bulls general manager said, championships are not won in the court, they're won in the front office. That being said, guys, football is all about matchups as much as I like talking about general managers. Jerm, there are matchups and several matchups in football. For you, what is the defining matchup in Super Bowl 56 that will tilt this game?
To me, it's always in the big games like this, it's always the same matchup. And it just depends on which side is stronger. So for me, watching how both these teams play, it's whoever's defense has the ability to rush four, right? Because the firepower offensively, I believe Uzma is going to be trying to play on whatever knee issue he has. So that adds a weapon no matter what percentage he's at. The receivers on both sides are outstanding. So for me, there's not going to be done because you can't, or you're going to get carved up. Both these quarterbacks have the ability to carve you up. So which defense is going to be able to create the most pressure with four rushers? Now, we'll get into this later. You know, I don't think it's a surprise which defensive line is probably better, but Burrow has been able to mitigate the offensive line, which is the weak point for the Bengals. The Titans, who have a really good defensive line, gave up 9 sacks, or that offensive line for the Bengals gave up 9 sacks, and Joe Burrow was able to win the game. So I'm not going to say it's a slam dunk, but whatever team can quarterback to more mistakes is probably going to be a good indicator of how the game's going to go.
Another matchup for you, Dwayne, or same thing?
When the Rams won the Super Bowl, that was my initial reaction. Was, geez, Joe Burrow is probably going to get sacked 9 times again. And I don't think it's, I mean, and this isn't, you know, that's a no-brainer. I feel, though, like we have to get a little bit more specific. And this is no shot at Cooper Kupp. This is, you know, I was told as a Packers fan, I don't have a valid opinion in who's the best wide receiver in the NFL because I think that Devontae Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL. And I can't say that because that's my Packer bias. Whatever. Cooper Kupp, whether we like it or not, is a slot receiver. Cooper Kupp plays a lot of snaps in the slot. No, yeah, they line him up outside, and he's a great wide receiver. I'm not saying he's bad, but the point that I'm making is Cincinnati's defense has to force Matt Stafford to beat them with OBJ. That's the only way that Cincinnati has a legitimate shot at mitigating this offense because Cam Akers came back in 6 months or something from an Achilles injury, and he's looking like a man on the mission in the backfield. Obviously, you have Odell Beckham Jr. and you have Cooper Kupp, and that's really what it is. Because if Cooper Kupp goes for 11 receptions for 142 and 2 touchdowns again, like he did against San Francisco, the Bengals can just chalk this up as a loss, an extreme loss. Like, don't even bother showing up to the game if Cooper Kupp hangs almost 150 on you. So I think that the key is the Bengals have to, whether it's bracket, whether it's have a safety over top of them at all times, they're going to have to mitigate Cooper Kupp. They're going to have to force Matt Stafford to rely on Odell Beckham Jr. It's not that I don't think that they can. It's not that I don't think that OBJ can win them the game. It's been a while since OBJ has been in that position. And I don't know if OBJ and Matt Stafford have the connection that Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford had. I mean, Stafford and Kupp, what do they? They like eat breakfast together or something like that. Like they know each other like the back of each other's hand. I don't think Stafford and OBJ have that connection. We already know that the defense are going to be bracketing Jamar Chase because that's what defenses have been doing all postseason. And he's going to have to take those short yards and make them 50, 60-yard plays down the field. And that's why I think that T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd will have another 2 solid games this week. But, yeah, if the Bengals really want to win, which I think they'll win the Super Bowl, if they really want to win, they're going to have to figure out a way to keep Cooper Kupp as quiet as possible.
I like watching Blaine play. I know all of our eyes typically go to position players, but I believe that football games are one of the trenches. When, that was last season. Kansas City had 2 major injuries on that offensive line, and that was the end of that game. And now we're seeing an even worse Cincinnati offensive line go into SoFi Stadium against Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, and Von Miller. I have to think that matchup, however they can mitigate those 3 pass rushers, is going to decide Super Bowl 56. I honestly think, right, and this is an offensive line that's given up, I want to say 12 sacks in 3 games. That does not bode well against these pass rushers. Granted, only one of those 12 came against Kansas City, but that's a team that needs to blitz to get home. The Rams have no such issue. Yeah, I'm going to leak my pick here right now. It's the primary reason because I love Joe Burrow. I love their offense. I love their defensive coordinator in being able to adjust on the fly in second halves. Zach Taylor is okay for me. I like Cincinnati, and I would really love for Cincinnati to win this game. I find it hard for me to bet against arguably the worst offensive line in this entire playoffs to hold up against, as Dwayne himself calls it, arguably the best defensive lineman we have ever seen play the game of football in Aaron Donald, against Leonard Floyd, against Von Miller. I saw today, to mitigate Kansas City. I was watching on ESPN's NFL show. They showed that the Bengals threw a lot of screen passes to slow them down, right? To get behind them, et cetera, et cetera. I have to believe that will be the game plan against this front because unlike Kansas City, they don't have to blitz. So, guys, I'm going to pick, and I don't want to because it seems I'm going with a favorite pick here, but I'm going to pick the Rams because Aaron Donald is really, really good.
Yeah.
Leonard Floyd is underrated. Von Miller has picked up since the last couple of games, and this offensive line is really, really, really bad. Yeah, guys, so Jerm, who wins Super Bowl 56 and why?
So yeah, there's 2 trains of thought. There's my heart and there's my head. Obviously, I think everybody would like to see the Cincinnati Bengals win this matchup. They were outmatched, and I will say they were outmatched their last 2 matchups, and they have found a way to win. So I'm not going to be surprised if the Bengals do win it. But if I'm looking at it logically, the Rams have the better offense. They have the better defense. They have all the star power. They should dominate. So I guess I would pick the Rams if I had a gun to my head and had to pick a winner that I would feel semi-confident about. But God, man, it's so hard to not want Joe Burrow to do this. But if you're looking at just the facts and kind of just looking at it from a logical standpoint, the Rams actually should probably dominate this game. And so we'll see what happens there.
Guys, if you didn't tune in earlier, Dwayne is about to give you 3 words.
Joseph
Take it away.
Lee Burrow. Sits. That's all I need. Joe Burrow is that guy. And I feel it is incumbent upon me to say that you're right. The Rams are probably going to crush the Bengals. You're 1,000% correct. They are probably going to smack Joe Burrow in the mouth harder than he's ever been smacked in the mouth before. He's going to wish he was still playing in one of those SEC football stadiums. I don't care about any of that. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals have defied odds this season. Have defied odds. They forget making the playoffs. They won an AFC North division that they've been bringing up the caboose for as long as I've been alive. just about, right? That's number one. Then they make the playoffs, okay? Now, they're playing the Raiders, who they're the better team, but come on, they don't have the best, since the Bo Jackson thing, they don't really have the best success in the playoffs. Oh, they beat the Raiders at home. And then they go to Nashville and Joe Burrow gets pounded 9 times, but he keeps getting back up. And next thing you know, Evan McPherson comes out and they're in the AFC Championship game. And then they go to Arrowhead and they're down 21-3. And all of a sudden we're sitting here talking about the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl? The Super Bowl. A team that won what was it? 2 games last season? They didn't win more than 5, I don't think. Joseph Lee Burrow, who, as Jerm mentioned correctly, has only really played a year and a half worth of games because he missed the back half or the last 6 or 7 games of last season when he tore his ACL in Washington. Joseph Lee Burrow is the today, the tomorrow, and the future of the Cincinnati Bengals organization. And that starts by hosting the Lombardi Trophy in Cincinnati this Sunday in the Super Bowl. We're going to win. It's going to be a beautiful thing to see. Joseph Lee Burrow.
I hope you're correct. I hope I get to see a guy win a national title game, win a Heisman, and win a Super Bowl, because I don't think any quarterback has ever done that before, or any player. Yeah, I don't think any player, period, has ever done that before. I will say this, like I said before, I don't think that the Bengals can get away like they did with Patrick Mahomes, rushing 3, dropping 8, and trying to trick Sean McVay and Matt Stafford, because they're going to get a heavy dose of Cam Akers if that's the situation, to use their running backs properly. But guys, it feels almost like the Super Bowl is the secondary news item leading into the Super Bowl, because when we all thought that the focus would have been on the Cincinnati Bengals, huge turnaround, the Rams justifying all of these trades of their draft picks, Brian Flores says, no, hold on a second here. We have a problem in the NFL, and it begins with the letter R. And we're all aware now of the lawsuit that he has filed against the NFL and 3 clubs belonging to the NFL. Dwayne, I know that you feel extremely passionate about this, so I'll let you start here. Do you think that Brian Flores has a real case, and does he have enough evidence to prove and win and also prove that the NFL is racist in its hiring practices?
Does he have proof? Yeah. Does he have a shot at winning though? No. And it's not because the case. It's not because he doesn't have a good case. It's not because what he's saying isn't based in fact. Because it is. The NFL is racist. Has been racist for a long time. Ironically enough, the Rooney Rule was implemented in 2003. There have been less head coaches that have been hired for long-term jobs post the Rooney Rule than before the Rooney Rule. So he's got an argument. But I said this on my show last Friday with Steezy, and I'll say it again here. It is hard to sue the NFL. And the reason why it's hard to sue the NFL is because the NFL is going to do everything it can in its power to settle. The NFL doesn't want to be tied up in litigation for months on end or potentially years on end, which this case has the potential to do, is tie them up in litigation for a very, 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 very long time. It has that possibility. But in order, if we're being realistic here, and I hate to say this, but it's the truth, if Brian Flores were to have any shot at winning this case, someone not named Roger Goodell would have to be the commissioner of the NFL. Because Roger Goodell, from what I've witnessed in my very short experience here on the earth, and from what I know about the history of Roger Goodell as a commissioner, from if you just look back not too long ago to the Colin Kaepernick thing, Roger Goodell is not interested in really changing anything as it pertains to racial advancement, so to speak. He's just going to throw some money at it. That's what he does. Roger Goodell throws money at problems, whether it's these domestic violence cases, whether it's situations like this where players or coaches are accusing the NFL of being racist. He's going to throw money at it. He's got a lot of money to do that, and so I guess that's kind of what comes with the territory. But that's not the healthiest way to do it. That's not at all the best way to do it. I said it on Bert and Jerm show last week. System sucks. It's not broken. It's doing what it's supposed to do, but they're going to have to completely get rid of it and make a new one. Roger Goodell is not interested in doing that. The NFL is not interested in doing that. And the NFL owners aren't interested in doing that. So I feel for Brian Flores because of all these hirings that we've seen, with an exception of Lovie Smith, who was hired today by the Texans, I haven't seen one guy that was hired where I legitimately thought that they were more deserving or a better candidate than Brian Flores. I just don't. No. You can throw Brian Daboll in there. I think maybe that's the one exception. But like outside of that, really, when you look at the Vikings, the Bears, the Raiders, like all these teams who, let's be honest, he shouldn't have been fired to begin with, but all these teams that had to hire head coaches, I don't think there's one guy that's more deserving of an NFL coaching job in this cycle than Brian Flores. And you know, he was on Jay Williams' new podcast with NPR the other day, and he's been on Get Up, obviously, and he said that if never coaching in the NFL again means that he gets to change how all this is done, then he'll take it. And I believe him. I believe that that's how he feels. But it's unfortunate that we could be sitting in a situation where not only is he not coaching again in the NFL, but also no change comes of this. And based on what we know of history, it's not likely that any change is going to come from Brian Flores suing the NFL.
Jerm, what's your take on Brian Flores' fight against the NFL?
It's a noble cause. It's a fight that he has no chance of winning, though, because the same issues that will exist before Brian Flores did this will exist after. I don't think the NFL is racist. I think the NFL owners are racist. I think there is a good old boys club mentality that exists there. We can't stop rich white people from hiring white people. That's just the way it is. There's no, the Rooney Rule actually had to be forced to be implemented by adding compensatory picks. You couldn't even incentivize these white guys for even interviewing black or minority candidates. That in itself is a problem that can't be solved by litigation or a lawsuit. They'll settle in some manner. They'll do something. They'll add more stipulations to the hiring process. Maybe they'll add first round picks that you can use one time, if you hire a minority coach. But at that point, think a team like the Texans, right? Lovie Smith is a wonderful man. Everything you read about him is great. But this was a token hire. They wanted, and the tea leaves are not really hard to read here, right? The Texans wanted Josh McCown. I don't care what anybody says. But you can't hire a person who's never had coaching experience right after his lawsuit was announced, and getting a job in front of the black man that was already on the staff that the players already liked. It would have been a slap in the face to him. So shout out to Lovie Smith, but Brian Flores is a significantly better coach than he is. Lovie Smith hasn't gone over 500 since 2012, and he's been coaching in college. So yes, he coached in a Super Bowl one time, but all the evidence points that Lovie Smith's not a good coach. So all that says to me is this was a token hire because the Texans weren't going to be good anyway. Let's just get Smith in here for a year or two. We'll can him, and then we'll hire the guy we really want, which is Josh McCown. I wouldn't even be surprised if Josh McCown ends up on the Texans staff to be groomed to be the next head coach within the next year or so. But nothing's going to change, man. Like it's the only thing that you can do, and it's an extreme thought, all the black stars and all the black coaches and anybody who's black with money needs to go holler at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and put all their XFL. That's a 20-year plan because the NFL is just too large. But another entity that can combat the NFL and come up with a way to have more diversity, or guys like Robert Smith, you have to wait for these, I pray to God he gets to own the not Chicago Bears, I'm sorry, the Denver Broncos. Black owners need to infiltrate the NFL. pull your money together, have some ownership groups, outbid these white folks, start owning these teams. That way you can do things the right way. But as long as it's just like this country, as long as old rich white people are in power, things will not change. Continue to see things the way they are.
Before Justin gets in, because I know a lot of people talk about the ownership thing. That's a valid point. It sounds good. But they still vote on a bid. Even if the three of us wanted to, if we had the funds and had the means to go pool and buy a football team, and since they're in better standing than us right now, and because the Packers are owned by the fans, let's say we all want to go buy the Bills, right? Like, and we all had the money to go buy the Bills, and the owner of the Bills said, "All right, you want to sell the Bills? Here, you can sell the Bills." Then you got to get the proof, the sale has to be approved, for lack of a better term, by all the other owners in the NFL. So even if we have the money and we outbid everybody else, and the owners of the Buffalo Bills say, yes, you, Marcus, Justin, and Jerm can now be the owners of the Buffalo Bills. If the other 30 white guys and the owner of the Jaguars all say no, then we can't own the Bills, right? So there's that component, there's that aspect of it too. And it's just really unfortunate that a lot of the issues that exist in the NFL have a lot to do with the socioeconomic structure of the country in general. Sucks. There's not many of us that have the money just laying around to own an NFL team. And of the people in that very small selection of our population in the country, none of them would take them serious. No one really took P. Diddy serious when he said he wanted to buy the Panthers. And no one's really going to they might take The Rock serious because The Rock is a businessman and he's got, a long list of acts. You know what I mean? It's of these guys that are in that position, not a lot of them are going to take them serious. And so I'd love to see a black guy own a football team. I would, because it would mean that at least for that football team, the people that deserve jobs, that haven't been getting jobs simply because of the color of their skin, would get those jobs. But it's just hard. And I think that's the thing. And I feel like that's the thing that the NFL always falls back on. It's you could do that. But the NFL knows that there aren't a lot of people that can. And they also know there's not a lot of people that would be seriously, would be looked at as a serious owner if Jay-Z walks into the thing and says, you know what, I'm gonna buy the Giants.
Jay-Z's a bad example. Jay-Z's with them.
Jay-Z is a bad example. He's not the best example, but what I mean is on the outside looking in, you look at Jay-Z owning the Giants. Oh, all right. That's cool. But would anybody take the Giants serious if Jay-Z was the owner? Probably not. And it's not because of Jay-Z, because Jay-Z's, great dude, billionaire, you know what I'm saying? He's smart with his business individual. You get the point. These guys that are up there in that bracket of money that have the ability to do that, no one's going to look at them seriously unless they're a blue collar.
Well, that's a different conversation. I'm speaking to what would it take to change, right? So what would it take to change is more Robert Smiths. What we're saying, whether you want to say Jay-Z, The Rock, Diddy, whoever, black owners need to get into the NFL somehow. That would actually strengthen Brian Flores' case if black people with money try to get a seat at the table and are effectively iced out. That would only strengthen the racist argument for ownership in the NFL. Like I said, the only other way is all the black people just stand up and kind of boycott the NFL and say, hey, Eric Bieniemy, why doesn't he have a job? Why is Jim Caldwell still not having a job? He brought the Lions to the playoffs. Why is Josh McCown the front of the line? We'll never see a black Matt LaFleur. That type of ascension doesn't happen. The black folks get the worst jobs in the NFL. They get the worst jobs. They get the scraps, the Houston Texans jobs, and then they're the first ones out. And it's a joke. I mean, I don't even know how you could argue against it. Yes, Brian Flores has proof. Accidentally, because Bill Belichick couldn't distinguish white Brian from black Brian, and that's proof enough. They weren't even going to give this dude a chance, and that needs to change. The fact that yes, you can hire whoever you want to hire, but Eric Bieniemy's not even getting a shot. Brian Flores, back-to-back winning seasons. How can he's getting iced out and he'll never coach again. He definitely won't coach the Giants, the Dolphins, or the Broncos because of his lawsuit specifically. But now he lost out on the best job he's probably going to get. Brian Flores, I wish him best of luck. We'll probably never see him again. But it's a losing battle because it doesn't matter when the old white money still runs the NFL and will continue to run the NFL.
I agree with both of you, huh? Like, I can't even add on to what the two of you have said. And I hate to sound like I'm agreeing with philosophy of Kyrie Irving of all people. The only way around this is if we start our own thing. It's going to have to come to that point. Like, and I agreed with Kyrie when he said during the bubble, that was the time for NBA players to boycott the league. I think the only way that this happens is either we all decide we are 70% of the labor force. We can actually call the shots by deciding either we're going to start our own thing. Obviously, it means we're going to have to take huge financial hits because we're not going to immediately make the money that we're accustomed to making. Or my option, the players are going to have to boycott the Super Bowl. This Super Bowl. And obviously the black players will just have to say, all right, if this is what your stance is, if you, within 2 hours of reading a lawsuit, can say this lawsuit is meritless, no problem, we'll boycott this. And I'll give Roger Goodell some credit because, as you all correctly said, this is an ownership thing, huh? Because Roger Goodell quickly still wrote a memo to the league saying the lack of diversity in management and in head coaching circles is a problem. He wrote up that memo. And obviously, these are his employers he's talking to, so I don't know how much longer Roger Goodell is going to last or whatever power he has. This is an ownership thing. Speaking now directly to Flores, right? I applaud him for making this decision because as the three of us sit here, right, we are speaking about this as if this is a fantasy thing. This is this guy's livelihood. This is these coaches' livelihood. This is how they make their money. This is how they feed their family. And for you to make this stance means you know you are never going to coach or be a head coach in this league ever again. You have to know this. Similarly with Colin Kaepernick, you have to know you're not getting back in here. And it means this has to be very disheartening that Brian Flores said or decided he had to come to this point. And I'll show you why, right? It's and the Broncos situation just for a second and focus directly on Miami. Imagine you are being told as a black man that you're difficult to work with because you don't want to break league rules to type. Imagine that. Imagine as a black man you are told you are difficult to work with because you don't want to break league rules again by courting a guy who is under contract in Tom Brady. Imagine as a black man you are told you are impossible to work with because you told them, I don't want Tua Tagovailoa as my quarterback. I want Justin Herbert. You chose Tua Tagovailoa anyway. And then imagine as a black man, after all of these things, you are fired and told you are still impossible to work with, although you gave Miami their first successive winning seasons in however long. Imagine that. And then on top of it, when you figure, okay, you fired me. I know we're talking about a giant situation, of course. And all along, the feelings you had were confirmed in one text message. When someone tells you, by accident, congratulations for a job, you are 3 days away from interviewing. It is a sham. It is a sham.
Yeah.
Then before your Miami job, you turn up for Denver job. Oh, we're not racist. We hired Vance Joseph before their defensive guy that they had and they just put out. But yeah, they hired Vance Joseph. Imagine as a serious candidate, you watch an NFL legend in John Elway, a guy who is celebrated at every coin toss, at every flip, every time they turn around, the Broncos celebrate this man. Not only does he and his people turn up an hour late, they turn up an hour late drunk for an interview, and some of these people don't even ask you a simple question. Not one. Imagine how you would feel. And then you watch guy after guy after guy, people who are less qualified than you, people who have either no head coaching experience, no wins under their belt, nothing to hang their hat on, all because either they are tied to a particular coaching tree or simply because they look like the guy that is hiring them. Imagine how helpless Brian Flores must feel that he's willing to give up his livelihood to do all this. Dwayne hopping.
There's two things. First, I think, and this is something that I think kind of gets glossed over, and it's a comparison that not a lot of people want to make, but I have no problem making it. I've been making this comparison for a very, very, very long time. I started making the comparison in college, in high school, and when they revised the Rooney Rule to add those compensatory third-round picks, I think it is in November 2020 when they edited the rule with JC2A. Just one big slave trade. Like, and people don't want to say that because slave is such a dirty word and it's such a dirty part of history, and it is. Unfortunate. That's what it is. Why, if at that point, if when that meeting was had and it was decided, okay, the only way that we can get these guys to legitimately interview these guys and bring more guys in and hire them is to give them draft picks, why was that light bulb not clicked off in someone's head? Oh, like maybe this really is a problem. Like, how do you get to that and then say, then a guy comes with a 58-page lawsuit and you say, there's no issue. If you have to compensate your owners with draft picks as an incentive or a potential incentive to get them to bring in more minority head coaching candidates, to get them to bring in more minority senior football operations candidates, to get them to hire more of these guys, which they're not doing anyway, that's an issue. And for you to do that, to give them this compensation, to give them this incentive of doing it, and they're still not doing it, how can you turn around after a guy is suing the league and say it's not an issue? That's like me going to Justin and say, Justin, look, I will give you $1,000 every time you go up and slap a white guy in the face. That's problematic. I didn't say anybody. I said white guy. But then it's even more problematic that you're deciding, man, I'll slap a white guy in the face for free. Like, these NFL teams and these NFL owners are literally saying, we don't need the picks. Like, to hell with them. We'll just not hire the guys anyway. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable that almost 20 years ago, the Rooney Rule was put in place and there was no real outline, no real guidelines. There was no true, this is what it's supposed to look like when you're bringing these guys in. All the Rooney Rule is a box to check. I've been saying it all week. A team could bring in somebody like a Brian Flores and sit in his face for 15 minutes. But the reports will all say, Adam Schefter and all these guys say, oh, yeah, well, Brian Flores was brought in for an interview for the Texans. They could ask him what his favorite color was for 15 minutes.
15 minutes. I ask Brian or the enemy about the
I'm willing to bet money that of all the interviews that Eric Bieniemy has been on, he's only been on one actual interview. I'm willing to bet that of all the interviews he's been on, only one time was he actually asked about football. Only one time was he asked about what he would do as the head coach of such and such football team. Everybody else is like, oh yeah, man, what's your favorite color? Where do you vacation in the summer? Nobody's really interviewing these guys. And that's problematic. And the fact that the rule had to be, first of all, the fact that the rule had to be implemented was an issue. The fact that it was implemented and then revised for compensation is an issue. And the fact that the compensation clearly isn't enough for these guys to want to do it is an issue. But a guy brings you a 58-page lawsuit and you're like, oh, there's no issue. He's got history on his side. He doesn't even need the 58 pages of what's happened to him. Just look back at what's happened.
He has a text message on his
He's
side.
got everything.
He has a smoking gun. He has, you know what I mean? It's funny you say that, though, because there's two. One, Brian Flores' attorneys just released a statement about the hiring of Lovie Smith, basically saying, while he's glad that a minority got the job, the fact that Brian Flores didn't get the job, it was simply because he filed this lawsuit, because they were very interested in him until he got the lawsuit. So that's something interesting, because I don't think anybody would sit there and say that Lovie Smith's a better coaching candidate than Brian Flores. So why would you not choose the better coach? It's because he's filing a lawsuit. So I don't know if that's being added to his lawsuit or if that's just something he's bringing up. But you also spoke about Eric Bieniemy not getting interviews. And before this show, I pulled up because I was going to use Eric Bieniemy as an example. This guy's been to what, 4 straight games, leading the.
Oh, and hold on, Jerm. I'm gonna let you get right. So let me introduce the segment, and then you go on to Eric Bieniemy. So quickly, guys, we had 9 head coaching vacancies in this, I want to say, semi-off period. 9 teams had head coach vacancies. And with the Rooney Rule in place, again, only one black coach filled it after Dennis Allen, who is white, of course, took today the New Orleans job. I guess you can see the Miami coach is biracial. He identifies as multiracial.
His grandmother on his father's side is black. So because of that, the Miami Dolphins get credit for hitting the Rooney Rule, and they will get
excuse my language,
pick.
And I'm going to apologize to my mother after take this. That's fucking baloney. Like, that's baloney. That's nonsense. It is extremely nonsense that Jesus.
It's all right. So let me finish up and let Jerm jump in. Of the 9 openings, as Jerm correctly mentioned, only Lovie Smith was hired, and that is the Texans' job, who just fired a black man after 1 season with arguably the worst roster in the entire NFL. Not exactly sure what Houston was asking of him there. Jerm, does this recent hiring situation where only one black candidate got one of the 9 openings, does this again prove the point that Flores is making, that there is a racism issue within the hiring practices of the NFL?
Oh, 100%. I don't know how you can say that there isn't. The again, we just spoke about, there's not going to be a Matt LaFleur, a meteoric rise to that head coaching position. If Mike Tomlin wasn't part of the Steelers organization, he would have been fired 4 or 5 years ago. If, the fact that we've only had less than 20 black head coaches in the NFL since its inception is proof enough. We don't get the opportunities that a lot of the white coaches would get. Now we got this octoroon down in Miami taking credit, for being black and claiming himself multiracial. I'd love to see how often he's used his blackness to get a job, because it sounds like he's only used his whiteness to shoot up the charts, to somehow magically be like, how can he, doing what he did with San Francisco, be considered ahead of Eric Bieniemy, who's led the #1 hottest team in the NFL over the last few years and has been coaching since I was in high school, back in 01, 02. So you want to talk about racism, and it goes to what Dwayne Marcus, my guy. I just found out his name was Marcus the whole time. Apparently his name's Dwayne. Everything's a lie.
We've been lied to.
Straight up, man. This guy, Eric Bieniemy didn't even get a second interview with the Texans. You know who got the second interview? Don't worry, I'll tell you. Josh McCown. How is that possible when Eric Bieniemy has a he has like almost 20-year career of coaching on top of the last 4 to 5 years where he's been with Kansas City running amok around the NFL. But don't worry, I'll pull up Josh McCown's, because the only reason he didn't get a second interview is because the other guy must have had even more stellar interview or stellar resume. So let's go ahead and read off Josh McCown's coaching entirety resume. In 2010, the assistant volunteer coach of Marvin Ridge High School, where they didn't win any games. 2019, 2021, he was the assistant coach of Rusk High School. I don't have their record. Oh, there's one more thing. He cooked pancakes for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes on Fridays. and taught gym class there. That's it. That's his long, whopping resume. As opposed to Eric Bieniemy, who was the running back coach for Colorado in 01 and 02, 03 to 05, running back coach for UCLA, 06 to 09, running back coach for Minnesota. 2010, he was the assistant head coach and running back coach for Minnesota. Went back, then he became the offensive coordinator for Colorado in 2011-12. Then from 13 to 17, he's been with Kansas City, where Alex Smith and Andy Reid went to a bunch of AFC games, won a bunch of games. And then him and Alex Smith scored 53 points in that classic AFC title game where, the defense let them down and they ended up losing that game. And then, of course, the last 4 years with Kansas as the offensive coordinator, and we've all seen what they've been doing. So don't talk to us about racism. Don't talk to us because it's the people who are sick of hearing racism are white people. And imagine how it feels. I know you're sick of hearing about it. Imagine how it feels to experience it, having to deal with it, having to live with it. But boo-hoo, you have to hear about it all the time, even though it doesn't affect you. So you probably should just shut up because you have no stake in this. But we do.
And I think the one thing that's kind of forgotten too, and this is going to be a little bit cliche, but it's the truth. Like, people forget that these people, like these quarterbacks and these coaches, all that, like, they forget that they're people. People have this, and by people, I mean white people, they have this belief that, like, athletes in the world of sports is just completely separated from everyday life. Like, people think that, because they got all this money and because they get paid to do this stuff, that they don't experience the everyday racism that myself, Justin, Jerm, or Neil may experience, that we see all the time on the news with police brutality. Like, we've heard several instances. Matter of fact, one of the Bennett brothers, I think it was Michael, actually, not too long ago, had an incident where he got in trouble with, he didn't get in trouble, but he had like a police brutality type thing with the police not too long ago. Like, people people forget all of this stuff because he's the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs. There's no way he doesn't experience racism. No, yeah, he does, and it's unfortunate. It is extremely unfortunate that there are a lot of guys who will only be known as offensive coordinators, and it's not because they weren't good enough or because they didn't have the chops to be a head coach. It was because the league just felt, no, we don't got to hire this guy. Mike Tomlin is, if I'm not mistaken, one of, if not the longest tenured minority head coach ever. Like, I didn't check the numbers, but if I'm not mistaken, he is the longest tenured minority head coach in the NFL in its history. In over a century, no minority head coach.
And it's only because he's attached to the Steelers.
Despite being attached to the Steelers, despite never having a losing season, it seems like, despite going to 2 Super Bowls and winning 1, it seems like almost every other year, some doofus has Mike Tomlin's name on his hot seat chart. Why? It's not because he's not a good coach. It's not because he doesn't have the resume. It's because he's black. It's insane.
He's only had 2. He's had winning seasons, right? To go ahead and say that he's just never had a losing season. He's only had 2 seasons in his 15-year coaching career where he was at 500, or 3, where he was at 500. 2019, 2012, and 2013. So, I mean,
it's insane. It's insane.
That's insane.
And every year it's like, oh man, Mike Tomlin might be on the hot seat. So a couple months ago,
why is he on fire?
When he was sitting at that podium, heated about a USC job, he had every right to be. Because not only is he a first ballot Hall of Fame head coach, not only is he one of the greatest coaches the league has ever seen, not only is he the longest tenured minority head coach in the NFL, you're asking Mike Tomlin if he is interested in leaving a cornerstone NFL franchise where he has found success year in and year out to go coach USC. That's no shot at USC. But the dream is to coach in the NFL. The dream isn't to go coach in the NFL for a couple of years and then jump back down to college and then jump back into the NFL. That's no shot to the guys that did it. That's not the goal. Mike Tomlin's been coaching for 15 years now. And it seems like almost for 15 years, somebody's like, Mike Tomlin might be on the hot seat. Mike Tomlin might not have a job next season. And then he comes out and then goes at least 500 again and then makes the playoffs when he shouldn't. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe not this year. But then the year after that's like, we're going to get him this time.
So, yep, we got you this year. And to that point, guys, and again, I obviously agree with y'all. Like, there's a slam dunk. It's obvious that these recent hirings just prove Brian Flores' point. It just feels like every situation, the goalpost just moves. You know, an example of that. What's the key word we keep hearing, or the key phrase? Oh, we want young offensive minds in the pipeline, or offensive minds in the pipeline to advance these quarterbacks. Because, of course, we don't have enough black people in that. Hold on. We put Jim Caldwell there. Put Eric Bieniemy there. We put Byron Leftwich there. No jobs. And then the same people who said we want young offensive minds, or just period young offensive minds, still had no problem in taking Brandon Staley or Matt Eberflus for jobs, and not just jobs with quarterbacks, highly rated young quarterbacks who were drafted high in terms of Justin Fields and Justin Herbert. And they were given to defensive minds, in a league that keeps asking, oh, we want offensive minds. So then it shifted, of course, in terms of Eric Bieniemy. The goalpost shifted once again, and they said, well, you know, he doesn't call plays under Andy Reid. Okay, no problem. Guess who also didn't call plays under Andy Reid and got a head coaching job, though? Doug Peterson got the job in Philadelphia. Well, he was not calling plays in Kansas City under Andy Reid. That wasn't a problem, to the point where he failed in developing Carson Wentz, got put out of Philadelphia, and has another head coaching job with another young, high quarterback talent in Trevor Lawrence. So then it became with Eric Bieniemy, because that's the guy we got to target. We got to take him out because he's the young, successful guy who, as Jerm, Jerm said it perfectly, showed his resume. And what Jerm forgot to add is that this guy was a draft pick and played and had a successful NFL career. So not only did he coach in both the college and NFL level, but he played in the NFL level, at the NFL level. So you got to take down Eric Bieniemy to take down our case, So what's the next thing? He has some very serious off-field issues. And no doubt, Eric Bieniemy does have some bad-looking off-field issues. Like, me personally, I will admit this. I probably would look away from Eric Bieniemy. But the off-field issues didn't stop them from looking at Urban Meyer, though. When we all knew, and they're so highly and publicly put up there for the entire world to see, we see one issue after another, Urban Meyer was still given a job with the same Trevor Lawrence. And then all of a sudden, Shad Khan is shocked when, in some short order, Urban Meyer hires a strength and conditioning coach who was accused of being racist. He didn't hop on a team flight to stay in a bar where he allegedly had mishandlings with a girl who's not his wife.
Oh no, allegedly. They got old boy on 4K, man. He's on the Summer Jam screen doing that.
Then he benches a guy and blames an assistant coach for not knowing that he's not in the game. And this one thing after another.
Not to mention, he also abused his players that were on the roster.
Yeah, he was kicking Josh Lambo.
Marvin Jones, who is known as a very serious locker room guy from his time to Detroit all the way to Jacksonville, although on an issue with that guy. And Shad Khan had the temerity, the testicular fortitude to look at us and pretend they didn't know this about Urban Meyer, controversies in Urban Meyer. But he had 30 Florida Gators charged during his time, including recruiting a known gangbanger in the now late Aaron Hernandez to his team. And we are now shocked that Urban Meyer brings controversy to the NFL. Oh my gosh. So that's used against Eric Bieniemy.
But it shouldn't. It shouldn't, though. Like that that's the thing that bothers me the most, because with all of the stuff that surrounded Urban Meyer, he was still given basically the keys. That and the fact that it wouldn't, again, how can you not look at that and say, wow, that's, if not racist, there's a lot of prejudice behind that, right? There's a lot of bias, white bias behind that, to the point where a guy who was a mercenary in college had history of covering up domestic violence from his assistant coaches to what he did in terms of on the NFL level. And yet Eric Bieniemy can't get a job. Brian Flores can't get a job after winning back-to-back seasons because rich white guys just don't like him. But that doesn't happen to white coaches. It rarely happens to white coaches in terms of clashing with the owners. I don't understand it. There's a lot of leash and leeway. Oh, go ahead.
I have one more example before I let you hop in. One more.
Yeah, go for it, man.
So remember when the NFL or the Chargers owners got rid of Anthony Lynn, right? It was because he couldn't win one-score games and the defense was just atrocious, although he didn't have Derwin James for the entire season. So you bring a defensive mind from Los Angeles Rams in terms of Brandon Staley to improve that defense and give him another good young quarterback, Justin Herbert. And guess what? The defense got even worse on the defensive-minded Brandon Staley. They gave up 4.8 or 4.9 yards per carry. They were barely struck 500 on one-score games. And then the shock of it all, the one-score game that Brandon Staley had to do absolutely nothing. Stand up on the sideline, fold your arms, and do absolutely nothing. Imagine Jerm and Dwayne. I told you to excel at your job, stand, fold your arms, and do nothing, and you still couldn't get that done. The three of us and the entire NFL watching public watched Brandon Staley when the entire world knew that the Las Vegas Raiders were playing for a tie to get into the playoffs, which would have put the Chargers into the playoffs. What did we watch Brandon Staley do? He sat down when all he had to do was nothing, call the timeout.
Mm-hmm.
And what was his justification for it? Here's the irony. His justification for that was, no, they were going to run a play, and we had to make sure to get our best.
And you give it it was like a 10, 15-yard run the very next play.
And they still gave up a huge run.
Bozo.
They still gave up a huge run to knock the Chargers out of the playoffs when all Brandon Staley had to do was nothing.
Yeah.
And where is the heat on Brandon Staley for having more defensive players, including Derwin James, for an entire season? Where is the heat on Brandon Staley? Because we had to get Anthony Lynn out of LA and away from Justin Herbert.
There's one more thing I want to talk about. It's Byron Leftwich. Because Byron Leftwich's name was in the hat for the Jaguars, and then he withdrew his name from the hat for, according to, I guess, what many people, I guess, in the front office believed was a bogus request. How bogus is it for a head coaching candidate to say, hey, I want to bring in my own GM? How many times have we seen a head coach get hired and then he be able to pick the GM? How many times have we seen that in the NFL? What's bogus about that? Or the other way around,
where the GM and the coach come together.
It is. You look at the Giants; they just hired the tandem from Buffalo. You look at Las Vegas; they just hired Josh McDaniels and a guy that was in the Patriots front office. It wasn't bizarre for Byron Leftwich to say, "Hey, you want to hire me as your head coach? I'll work here. I will be your head coach. The only thing I need is my pick at GM." He didn't ask him to trade everybody away. He didn't ask him to stand up on the desk of the office, butt naked, and do cartwheels. All he wanted was a simple right that it appeared every other head coaching candidate had been afforded. And Jerm talked about prejudice.
And on On top of that, you're missing one point. He's not only asking for general manager, he's asking for a competent one because Trent Baalke is terrible.
Trent Baalke is awful.
And if the hiring of Urban Meyer,
we saw Trent Baalke run Jim Harbaugh back into college. We saw Trent Baalke fire 4 straight head coaches in 4 seasons in Jacksonville. No, sorry, I had to add that into it.
You're right. And if the hiring of Urban Meyer didn't prove just how terrible he is at his job based on how all that unfolded, why are you still willing to hold on to this man when the Jacksonville Jaguars themselves said what they say? They said the whole reason why we hired Urban Meyer was because we wanted him to be the guy to coach Trevor Lawrence because he's our future. Well, now Urban Meyer's gone, but you still have the dumb GM that hired him. How is Trevor Lawrence going to be able to grow and prosper and develop in the Jacksonville Jaguars and be the face of the franchise, be the future of that franchise, if you still have the bozo GM that unleashed really all this mess in Jacksonville this season to begin with? How can you do that? It makes no sense.
The problem with Jacksonville is they have 2 problems. They have a doofus GM who went 7-25 when he was with San Francisco, and with Jim Harbaugh had to save his life, and then they ended up getting rid of him. He goes to Jacksonville, where he went to the perfect situation for Trent Baalke because Shaq Khan is also a doofus who will do anything to save a couple nickels, and he doesn't really know he really can't. He doesn't have any power because as the one lone minority owner, he will just bend to the will of all the other owners who happen to be old rich white guys. So you get no support there. Now, I will say, in terms of Byron Leftwich not getting this job because of Trent Baalke, you said earlier that none of the 9 hirings were deserving. I will say I do think Doug Peterson is deserving.
I didn't think they
He's
were
a
more
Super Bowl winning coach.
Brian Flores at the time. I actually like the Doug Peterson job because I've been saying for as long as I can remember that Doug Peterson should have never been out of Philadelphia to begin with. He didn't have a reason.
No. Now, here's the interesting thing about Jacksonville, because I was doing a show with a writer who wrote for the Jacksonville Jags and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few months ago, and this is right off the heels of the Gardner Minshew trade, and this shows the incompetence of Jacksonville. If everybody remembers, Gardner Minshew was traded for basically nothing.
Bag of chips.
After playing pretty well with a pretty bad Jacksonville team. He had 36 or 37 touchdowns to like 14 or 15 interceptions. He had a 63% completion percentage. He wasn't awful, is the point. He wasn't as bad as what their records in some of their games. He was the one bright star on that team. They traded him away for nothing as soon as Trevor Lawrence got there. And the writer told me from the people that were within, that was a split decision that Trent bought by himself. And a lot of people in the front office did not like that. And it was simply because Trevor Lawrence is the future, and it was the Cam Newton, Mac Jones situation where they didn't want Trevor Lawrence to worry about Gardner Minshew, where he could just be the unquestioned guy. Urban Meyer made that decision with Trent Baalke, and Trent Baalke backed him. That's incompetence to let your coach make that decision, especially when nobody even liked Urban Meyer from the beginning. From day one, nobody on that team liked Urban Meyer. And, and like I said, it's hard to defend. People think of Gardner Minshew and don't think much of him, but you don't even have a plan now. If Trevor Lawrence doesn't happen to be that guy, you were riding completely on Doug Peterson, and if that doesn't work, you're going to have to draft another firing Doug Peterson and getting another coach because you let incompetence make decisions for your franchise.
And to everyone that wants to use prejudice instead of racism, get over yourself. Like if you don't like the word racism and you'd rather use the word prejudice, get over yourself, because that's what it is. And Brian Flores and all these other guys and us sitting here for the last it's been like 30 minutes now, maybe a little bit over that we've been talking about this. We're not wrong for saying that it's racist, because it is. I'm not going to look at you and tell you that the sky is green when it's clearly blue. The same I wouldn't look at you and tell you that Jerm's hat is orange when it's clearly black. And
Jerm's hat is black
by design too.
And Jerm said it perfect earlier. These people don't want to talk about being racist because no one likes to be called racist. You know how you don't be called racist? Don't be racist. Don't do racist things, and we won't call you racist. It's very simple. It's really simple. It's as cut and dry as that. Not that I ever would. I wouldn't call Justin an idiot if he wasn't doing idiotic things. Because Justin's not an idiot, and Justin doesn't do idiotic things. Don't do racist things, and people won't think you're racist.
My wife may not agree with you, though.
This is just a shame. Like, right. It's just like, come on now. Again, you put the rule in place, and it does the complete opposite of what it was intended to do. You try to incentivize these guys, and like, I'd still rather not. These guys are really saying they would rather not have extra picks than hire a black dude. That's an issue.
Guys, we could go on, and I think I made an error by not making this Brian Flores episode in terms of a Super Bowl episode because, but I'll save that for later. We're going to wrap up here, guys. I did make an error by not making this a Brian Flores episode. So quickly, Joe and Marcus, I know my fans are typically yours, but still tell the people how to find you and what do you have coming up next.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at GTP Marcus. I'll be on Jerm's show, Stuff About Sports, on Wednesday for his Super Bowl show, his Super Bowl Super Show. And I'll be having my own super duper show of sorts on Friday with a lot of people. And that's not an understatement. It's going to be a lot of people. I haven't formally announced it, so I'll do it now. Production's going to slow down a bit after the Super Bowl. There's not going to be much coming out of the G.O.A.T Talk camp for a minute after the Super Bowl. But yeah, Super Bowl show this Friday. Be there, be square.
Guys, I think Jerm also has a super show as well. You all thought I was the only one. Tell them how to find you, Jerm, and how to get onto that super show.
Yeah, listen, more the merrier. We're doing the Super Bowl Super Show on Wednesday, 8:30. If you want to be a part of it, if you're a podcast, you got a show out there, you want to be part of it, send me a message on Instagram at Stuff About Sports, hashtag Stuff About Sports in your little Google bulls. If you can't find us, you're not trying because we're everywhere. Give us a shot.network. And give us a shot on YouTube. Facebook at Stuff About Sports. We got the Super Show on Wednesday. We're going to do a bunch of good things. We're going to talk the Super Bowl, obviously. We're going to play some games, over-under properly rated, and I like this move, which is a new game debuting. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I like doing the things with a bunch of pods. So be there, be square. Justin, you definitely got the invite, man. We're going to have we have The Divide, which is the Spearhead Show with our guy Mike. And then we have, I think his name is Mike in the Hat podcast. He hit me up. He wanted to be part of it. JT and the Don, Marcus, and Justin. So it's going to be a good show. If you want to be on it, hit me up. I'll get you the link.
And I was not going to let these guys one up me. I was like, oh no, these guys are super show. What they don't know, we are back again on Sunday. We don't have a time yet. Yes, Neil really was the driving force behind this. So I won't take any credit. I said, hey, Neil, like we're going to do this as a Super Bowl preview. Say, hey, why not do two? So we are back at this on Sunday at an undisclosed time, but the same space. I will let y'all know. I will put the links out. You're likely going to see these two guys again. But Sunday, not too long before the Super Bowl, yes, we have a pregame show to top all pregame shows. Don't go on ESPN. Don't go on Fox. Don't go on CBS. Do not go on NBC. Come right here, YouTube, hashtag this just in. You know how to find us. Are not trained. That's hashtag this just in. Don't be taken to Matt Skellerman's show. Make sure to put that hashtag. And you will be here. YouTube, you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram and on Twitter. Guys, it has been a blast, but there is one more show coming. So, gentlemen, be sure, hit Stuff About Sports on Wednesday. Turn around, go talk with Marcus on Friday. And again, right back here on Sunday before the Super Bowl, we have all the Super Bowl content. And we are going to be tired talking about Matt Stafford and Joe Cool. But for Marcus, for my guy Jerm, I am Justin of hashtag this Justin signing out. Thank y'all guys, and we will see you as the week progresses.
I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Johnny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. If God's with me, he don't matter. He'll just the same.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes? Shit.